A few months ago, someone wrote a comment that stayed with me. They said, "I don't understand what's wrong with me. My life is okay. I have a job. I have friends. Nothing terrible is happening. So why do I feel nothing?" Maybe that sounds familiar. You wake up, you go through your routine, you handle your responsibilities, and from the outside, everything appears stable. You are not in crisis. You are not falling apart. Yet something feels distant, like you are watching your own life instead of fully living it. There is no dramatic tragedy to point at, no obvious reason to justify the heaviness or the flatness inside. And sometimes the most confusing part is the guilt. You tell yourself you should be grateful, that other people have it worse, that your life is technically fine. So why does it feel hollow? Today we are not going to ask what is wrong with your life. We are going to ask what may have happened inside you that made fine feel empty. And by the end of this video, you may start to see that this feeling is not random, and it is not a personality flaw. It is a pattern that once made sense. One, emptiness is often emotional shutdown, not absence. When people say they feel empty, they often assume something is missing inside them. But emptiness is rarely a true absence of emotion. More often, it is emotional shutdown. If you grew up in an environment where feelings were inconvenient, dismissed, or overwhelming, your nervous system may have learned to cope by lowering emotional intensity. Not just negative emotions, but all emotions. As a child, this adaptation makes sense. If expressing sadness caused conflict or excitement was ignored, your brain adjusted quietly and reduced the volume. Over time, that lowered volume becomes your normal state. You may not feel deeply devastated, but you also do not feel deeply alive. This is why your life can appear stable and functional on the outside while feeling strangely flat on the inside. You're not broken. You are regulated for survival rather than aliveness. Emotional shutdown can even feel calm and controlled, which makes it harder to recognize. But beneath that neutrality is often unprocessed emotional experience that never had a safe outlet. When your system learned that feeling deeply was unsafe, it chose numbness as a compromise. That numbness can feel like emptiness for years without you realizing that it is actually protection. Two, you built stability, but not emotional meaning. A life that looks fine is not always a life that feels meaningful. Many people spend years working towards stability, such as building a career, achieving financial security, or maintaining a relationship. These are real accomplishments, but emotional fulfillment operates on a different level. You can build structure without building depth. If you were raised to value performance over presence, you may have learned to chase outcomes instead of emotional connection. Achievement gives you dopamine, but connection gives you meaning. When most of your energy has been focused on becoming competent, responsible, and successful, your emotional world may have remained underdeveloped. So when everything finally feels stable, you expect to feel complete. Instead, you feel quiet and flat, as if you reached a destination only to discover something essential was not included. That does not mean your life is wrong. It means emotional meaning is not automatically packaged with external order. Stability creates safety, but meaning requires engagement with your inner experience. Without that engagement, life can feel organized but emotionally undefined. 3, you may be disconnected from your own inner world. Emptiness can also be a sign of disconnection from yourself. If you grew up adapting to others, managing their moods, keeping peace, or meeting expectations, you likely became highly attuned outward. You learned how to read the room and anticipate reactions. However, you may not have learned how to read your own internal signals. Over time, constant outward focus weakens inward awareness. You might struggle to answer simple questions about what you genuinely want, what you truly enjoy, or what you are actually feeling. When your identity is built around functioning well for others, there may be little space left to explore your own emotional landscape. This creates an internal silence that can feel like emptiness, not because there is nothing inside you, but because you have not practiced listening. Emptiness sometimes reflects the gap between your adaptive self and your authentic self. You became who you needed to be in order to function, but you may not yet know who you naturally are. That unfamiliarity can feel like a void, even though it is actually uncharted territory waiting to be explored. For your nervous system may still be in survival mode. Even if your current life is calm and stable, your body may not fully believe that it is safe. If you experienced unpredictability, emotional inconsistency, or chronic stress earlier in life, your nervous system adapted to expect tension. Living in a constant state of alertness reshapes how your body interprets neutrality. When survival mode remains active for too long, the system eventually becomes exhausted and shifts into a low-energy state. Instead of anxiety, you experience emotional flatness, low motivation, and disconnection from pleasure. Your circumstances may have improved, but your nervous system does not automatically recalibrate. It requires repeated experiences of safety to reset. Until that happens, calm can feel unfamiliar, and unfamiliar can feel empty. The body that once learned to brace for impact does not instantly know how to relax into peace. As a result, it stays muted, not in crisis, but not fully alive either. In this sense, emptiness is less about character and more about physiology. It is the residue of long-term adaptation. 5. You might be mistaking peace for emptiness. Sometimes what feels like emptiness is actually the absence of chaos. If you grew up in environments filled with emotional intensity, conflict, or unpredictability, your brain may have associated intensity with aliveness. Drama feels stimulating, and unpredictability feels familiar. When adult life becomes steady and calm, your nervous system may interpret the absence of intensity as the absence of meaning. However, stability is not emptiness. It is unfamiliar peace. If love once felt like anxiety or emotional highs and lows, a healthy relationship may initially seem flat. If productivity once felt like urgency and pressure, a balanced routine may feel unremarkable. Your brain has simply not recalibrated its understanding of what safety feels like. Until it does, steadiness can seem like nothingness. Over time, though, calm reveals subtle emotional depth that chaos never allowed you to experience. Sometimes emptiness is not something missing. It is the absence of intensity in a system that once depended on it. Earlier, we asked what might have happened inside you that made fine feel empty. Now you can see that this feeling is rarely a flaw in your personality. It is often an adaptation. Maybe your system learned to survive by feeling less. Maybe you built a stable life without ever being taught how to build emotional depth. Or maybe what feels like emptiness is simply unfamiliar peace in a body that once depended on intensity. Whatever the reason, feeling empty does not mean there is nothing inside you. It may mean there is something inside you that has not yet felt safe enough to fully emerge. And that realization is not a verdict. It is a beginning. If this video resonated with you, take a moment to let yourself acknowledge that. You are not alone in this experience. And if you want to continue exploring topics like emotional numbness, attachment, and healing the patterns that quietly shape your life, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps this kind of conversation reach the people who need it most, and it tells YouTube that these topics matter. Sometimes the first step toward feeling again is simply understanding why you stopped, and we will keep having those conversations here.